That's all you got left, right? So uh, just try to make the best of it. I'm sure that professors are a little bit forgiving and giving you as much, guidance as they can. So just hang in there. And okay, so I guess we got as many as we're going to get. And you all see the exam, the practice exam. I'd like to go down to number C. Choose two cases you analyze this term. Compare and contrast. What I would do in taking this exam is I would make a chart on an empty piece of paper. You could either do it on the exam itself or you could do it separately. And I would make two columns, and I would have company A and company B on the two columns, and then I would, under column A, for example, I would divide that into two, and I would have compare and contrast on one company, and it would be basically the same on the other company, so I wouldn't necessarily need to do it on both. And it says compare and contrast how two of Porter's 5 forces impacted or will impact their respective industries and these organizations. You must pick the same 2 forces for both companies. So if you picked intensity of rivalry and power of suppliers, I would make it continue in the column, and under compare and contrast, I would put those 2 forces, and then underneath, I would then again put additional column for their industry and their organization. So I would divide up rivalry into industry and organization. I would divide up suppliers into industry and organization. So what I'm doing is I'm laying out a framework for you so you could make a checklist and make sure that all the questions or points of the question are answered. And when you start answering the question, you could go back and check off those points as you're describing the answer. You go back and you check off that part of the chart. Is everybody following me? Am I explaining that okay?
Your example is rivalry, and what was the other one?
For example, rivalry and supplier power. And you would describe, it says, impact or will impact their respective industries and these organizations. So with supplier power, you have to describe how it affects their industry and then the organization. With intensity of rivalry, you would have to describe how it impacted their industry and their organization. Okay? Everybody with me so far? So for each force, make sure you indicate whether the force can be viewed as a threat or an opportunity. And then you continue with that chart. And all you're doing is the chart right now, outlining the exact questions that need to be answered. So you don't answer it right away. First make the chart, make sure you cover all the points of the question. Because as you can see, there's multiple parts to the question. So going forward, it says opportunity or threat. So then you put down under intensity of rivalry, you would put down opportunity or threat. Under supplier power, opportunity or threat. When you get done with dissecting the question, you're going to find maybe 10 to 15 points that you have to cover in the question. I don't want you answering the question right away if you can help it. Students jump into the question without analyzing the question first. So I want to make sure that you do that. So now it says opportunity, threat or opportunity based on its resources and capabilities. So underneath the threat or the opportunity, you put down resources and capabilities for each force. Resources and capabilities for each force for each company. So if you added this up, I didn't add it up. I don't know if you did or kept track of how many points would be included in that first part, but I bet there's about 10. And then it says, discuss your specific recommendations to each company for exploiting these opportunities or countering these threats. So you would then say recommendation, specific recommendation for company A, specific recommendation for company B. Underneath the recommendation, it would be your to explain exploiting the opportunity or countering the threat, and then you justify your recommendation. So you state the recommendation first, and then you justify it. Are there any questions? I'll give you a second to digest that.
So it was state recommendation, and what was that second one?
Well, you state the recommendation. It says discuss your specific recommendation and justify your recommendation. So you're going to state what that recommendation is, and then you're going to justify it. Usually you justify it with some sort of evidence or information from the case or from the 10K that you could recollect. Okay?
In summary, so far, you want us to make a column, identify 2 of the 5 forces models, break it into industry and organization, identify it as a threat or opportunity, list resources and capabilities for each force, and then within that state recommendations and justify it using evidence from the case?
Well, you missed resource. Did you say resources and capabilities?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go through it one more time. Okay, just this is just an example, right? This isn't the actual question. You know that, right, James?
Yeah, no, I know that.
Okay. So if we look at compare and contrast, I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'll count, just for the heck of it, I'll count the number here. So we have compare and contrast. You have company A, company B. Then you have 2 forces. So you have supplier power and rivalry. And then you have industry and organization. And then you have opportunity or threat based on resources and capabilities with recommendations and justification. So there's company A and company B. What you do understand the difference between compare and contrast. Compare is similarity, and contrast is difference. So you're going to discuss, it says, choose 2 cases, compare and contrast how 2 of Porter's 5 forces impact or will impact their respective industries and organizations. So when you compare and contrast, you're going to be saying company A is similar to company B in that this force will impact the industry this way and it will impact the organization this way, but it's different, okay, because that's the contrast, in this way. So just remember that for each of supplier power and rivalry, you have to compare and contrast. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Anthony, it's good?
Yeah.
Okay. These are very detailed questions, so I want to make sure that you make a list of all the points that you have to cover. So just make sure that you understand the compare and contrast, supplier power and compare and contrast rivalry. You're actually going to be giving how many answers?
4.
For that's 4 answers. Okay? And then you're going to be discussing whether they are opportunities or threats based upon their resources and capabilities, and et cetera, et cetera. So you got 4, 5, 6, and 8, probably 10 to 12 different points to the question. And the question is going to be very similar in that it's going to be a compare and contrast question. And these are all the questions that I assigned for your weekly Apple case. So there was a method to my madness in developing a system whereby you could use your assignments as a study guide for the final exam. So as you can see, the recommendations, a subpart of an exam question will ask you to present recommendations for the firm with regard to the challenges or opportunities you discuss in the first part of the question. Make sure that your recommendations connect back to those challenges or opportunities. Don't come up with recommendations that have nothing to do with those threats or opportunities. Because I will go back and make sure that you made that connection. So when you write it, you could either write about company A at one time and then write about company B, or you could write company A and B simultaneously for each part of the question, whichever you feel more comfortable doing. And this is the rubric, and as you can see, 15% of the exam is based upon demonstrating a clear understanding of the question. And it says response directly addresses all aspects of the posed question. Response demonstrates an in-depth understanding of the required response. All parts of response are strong. So that's why I want you to outline the question first, because 15% of the grade is based upon understanding the question. Demonstrates effective application of relevant concepts, 30%. Demonstrates effective use of case data, and the case data could relate to either the case in the textbook or the 10K. Demonstrates ability to think strategically from an organizational perspective. Communicate effectively, and that has to do with being able to write coherently. And you're going to be typing this, and you could use as many pages as you need. There's no limit. I suggest that you outline it, like I said, first, and then you'll turn it in as one file and to turn it in. And you can't use any outside resources. I am taking you at your word that you won't be using anything outside. I didn't want to use, I think I told you about Respondus and Lockout. I didn't want to use those software programs. I don't believe in them. I believe in the honesty of my students, and I believe in the honesty of you wanting to get a fair grade, an honest grade, and an honest degree. I can only hope that that's the case, and I think that you'll do fine, and you'll feel better about yourself not using any outside resources. Okay? So I want you to do well. I think I'm giving you as much ammunition as I can. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have.